Eli sat alone in his small apartment, staring at his phone. Another failed date. Another rejection. The notifications blinked on his screen, but he didn't want to look at them. His friends had tried to comfort him, telling him that the right person would come along eventually. But after so many failed attempts, Eli wasn't sure anymore. He felt like he was invisible, like something was wrong with him that he couldn't fix. It wasn't that he wasn't a good person. Eli was kind, funny, and hardworking. But whenever he went on dates, things always seemed to fall apart. The women he met would smile politely, but by the end of the evening, they'd make excuses to leave. He didn't understand it. Was it his looks? His personality? Or was there something deeper that he just couldn't see? He leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his messy hair. It had been weeks since he'd even considered dating. The pain of rejection was beginning to feel like a constant weight on his chest. It was starting to feel like no matter what he did, he just wasn't good enough. The thoughts swirled in his mind, mixing with feelings of loneliness that seemed impossible to escape. Eli had always believed in love. As a child, he'd imagined the fairy tale romance, the kind you saw in movies or read about in books. But those dreams felt so distant now, like a far-off fantasy. The real world was nothing like the stories he imagined. People came and went, and love felt like something that was always out of reach. Every time he tried to reach for it, it slipped through his fingers. His friends had been supportive in their own way, always encouraging him to keep trying, to keep going out there and putting himself out there. But even they seemed to stop trying after a while. They saw the way he looked when he talked about his dating experiences, the way his shoulders slumped when he mentioned how things went wrong again. They were tired of hearing the same story. Eli was tired of living it. He stood up, walking over to the window and looking out at the city lights below. There were so many people out there, all living their own lives, connected to one another in ways he couldn't understand. Maybe he was just meant to be alone. Maybe he wasn't cut out for love. The thought made him feel empty inside, like he was a part of the world, but never truly a part of anything. As the night went on, Eli tried to distract himself with work. He had a project he'd been focusing on for weeks, something that required all of his attention. But even the hum of his computer couldn't chase away the loneliness that had crept into his heart. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. Maybe he just needed to sleep, to let the quiet of the night take over and clear his mind. Just as he was about to close his eyes, a new notification appeared on his phone. A message from his old friend Rachel. Eli had known Rachel for years. She was one of the few people who had stuck around through all the ups and downs. She had been there during his college years, when everything was still new and exciting, and she had supported him through the rough times too. He opened the message. "Hey, Eli. I know it's been a while, but I was thinking maybe we should hang out sometime. No pressure, just a couple of friends catching up. Let me know." Eli smiled a little at the message. Rachel had always been the one person who seemed to understand him, but he wasn't sure if he could face another night of hearing how he should just keep trying. But he couldn't resist replying. "Sounds good. Let's catch up soon." He put his phone down, his smile fading. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate Rachel's friendship, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it would just be more of the same. Maybe she'd try to cheer him up, maybe suggest another date or someone to meet, but he couldn't imagine it working. Not anymore. He was tired of pretending that everything was fine, when it wasn't. Still, he wasn't completely sure why he'd agreed. Maybe he just didn't want to be alone tonight. Maybe he needed someone to talk to, even if it was just for a little while. The next morning, as Eli walked into the cafe to meet Rachel, he felt a little less sure of himself than usual. He had dressed casually, hoping to blend in, but he couldn't stop thinking about how he looked. What if Rachel saw the sadness in his eyes? What if she knew just how much he hurt inside? When Rachel waved to him from across the room, Eli smiled, trying to push his doubts aside. But the moment he sat down, the conversation turned to the usual topic, his dating life. "You know, Eli, you've got to put yourself out there. Rachel said, her voice warm but firm. "You're a great guy. You just need to find someone who sees that." Eli's heart sank. Here it was again. The same well-meaning advice. The same empty words. He nodded, pretending to listen, but inside, he was already shutting down. Another reminder that no matter how hard he tried, it never seemed to be enough. As they continued to talk, Eli realized something that he hadn't been able to admit before. He didn't just feel rejected by the women he met. He felt rejected by the whole idea of love. It wasn't just about the failures. It was about the growing belief that he didn't deserve it at all. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going like this. Little did he know, a new chapter of his life was about to begin. One that would take him far away from Earth and change everything he thought he knew about love. Eli had never imagined he would be on a space station. The hum of the engines, the flashing lights of distant stars, and the sound of footsteps echoing in the metal halls all felt surreal. He had agreed to come here for a business meeting, a chance to work on a project that could help him get away from Earth's chaos, even if just for a while. But as he wandered through the station, he felt an odd mix of awe and isolation. Here, surrounded by aliens and humans from all over the galaxy, he couldn't shake the feeling that he still didn't belong. He wandered into a small cafe on the station, hoping to grab a coffee and clear his mind. The place was quiet, with a few people scattered around, each lost in their own thoughts. Eli sat at the counter, ordering a drink, and stared out at the view of space. For a brief moment, he felt a sense of peace, but then his mind wandered back to the emptiness he had been carrying with him for so long. "Are you all right?" A soft voice broke through his thoughts. Eli turned his head to see a tall, beautiful alien woman standing beside him. She had striking purple skin that shimmered under the station's artificial lights, and her silver eyes looked at him with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. She wore a simple but elegant outfit, and her long hair flowed like liquid silver. "I didn't mean to startle you," she continued, her voice calm and warm. "I just thought you seemed a little lost." Eli blinked, unsure of what to say. He had never seen anyone like her before. She was stunning, and her presence was almost overwhelming. For a moment, he forgot how to speak. I'm fine," Eli finally managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Just thinking." The woman smiled, and there was something about her smile that made Eli feel both calm and nervous at the same time. She took a seat beside him, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm Lyra," she introduced herself. "I'm an ambassador from the planet area." "And you are?" Eli couldn't help but be surprised. An ambassador. He had heard of the area people before, famous for their advanced technology and peaceful culture, but he had never met one in person. "I'm Eli," he replied, feeling a little awkward. "I didn't expect to meet someone like you here. An ambassador, I mean." Lyra's smile grew wider, and there was a hint of mischief in her eyes. "I don't always carry the title with me. Sometimes I prefer to just be Lyra." Eli laughed, the sound escaping before he could stop it. It felt good to laugh again, to feel like himself for just a moment. "So what brings you to this station?" he asked, hoping to change the subject. He had no idea how to talk to someone like her, someone so different from the women he was used to. Lyra leaned back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. "I'm here for a diplomatic mission," she said. "But I've been here long enough to see that sometimes it's not the big things that matter. It's the little moments, the quiet moments, when you connect with someone. Don't you think?" Eli wasn't sure what to say to that. He had never really thought about it that way. Most of the time, his focus had been on finding someone to love, someone who would accept him. He had never considered the idea that true connection could be something so simple and quiet. "You're a deep thinker," Eli said with a small smile. "I think that's rare." Lyra's smile softened, and she leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking with his. "Maybe it's just that I see more than most people realize. We're all so caught up in our own lives, trying to find something, but we forget to look at the people around us, to really see them. Eli felt a sudden connection to her words. It was almost like she could see straight through him, past the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time in a long while, he felt like someone understood him. As they talked, Eli found himself opening up to Lyra in ways he hadn't with anyone before. She listened to him, truly listened, without judgment or impatience. She didn't offer advice or try to fix his problems. She simply acknowledged his feelings, and that made all the difference. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and before he knew it, hours had passed. The space station had grown quieter, and the sky outside had shifted from the bright light of day to the deep blues and purples of space night. Eli couldn't remember the last time he had enjoyed a conversation this much. It felt natural, easy, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. As the conversation drew to a close, Lyra stood up, her silver eyes meeting his one last time. "It was a pleasure talking to you, Eli," she said softly. "I hope we can do this again sometime." Eli stood up too, a little hesitant. He didn't want the conversation to end, didn't want this strange feeling of connection to vanish. "I'd like that," he said, his voice a little more confident than before. Lyra smiled once more, and just as she was about to turn to leave, she paused. "You know," she said, her tone teasing, "I think you're someone who's worth knowing. Don't let anyone make you feel less than that." Eli watched her walk away, feeling the warmth spread through him. There was something about Lyra that was unlike anyone he had ever met. It wasn't just her beauty. It was the way she saw the world, the way she saw him. He felt lighter, as if a weight he hadn't even known he was carrying had been lifted. As he stood there, staring after her, Eli couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something completely unexpected. And for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. A few weeks had passed since Eli met Lyra. Their conversations continued, becoming more frequent and deeper with each passing day. Lyra's words stuck with him long after their encounters, and the quiet understanding she offered made him feel like he was finally seen in a way he had always hoped for. What started as an unexpected meeting had turned into something far more significant. Eli knew something was changing within him, something he wasn't ready to fully understand yet, but he was open to finding out. One day, after a long conversation about human emotions and alien cultures, Lyra surprised him with an invitation. "You know, Eli," she said, her voice warm over the communication link, "I would love for you to visit my home planet. It's called Area. It's very different from Earth, but I think you might find it fascinating." Eli was taken aback. The idea of leaving Earth, even temporarily, seemed daunting. But then he remembered how Lyra had made him feel, heard, appreciated, and special. Maybe it was time for a change. He had been stuck in his routine for so long, wondering why nothing ever worked out for him. Maybe this was his chance to see something different, something beyond his everyday world. After a moment of hesitation, Eli found himself agreeing. "I'd love to see it. When should I come?" Lyra's excitement was clear in her voice. "I'll arrange everything. Just get ready to be amazed." The following week, Eli found himself stepping onto a sleek transport ship, ready to leave the familiar world of Earth behind. His heart raced with a mix of nerves and excitement. As the ship took off, he looked out of the window, watching as the planet he had known all his life shrank away. The stars ahead seemed so far, yet somehow closer than ever. The journey to Area was long, but Eli didn't mind. He spent most of the time thinking about Lyra and what to expect. What was this alien world really like? Would he fit in? When the ship finally landed, he was greeted by a sprawling, peaceful city. Area wasn't like Earth's busy metropolises. It was calm and quiet, with buildings that seemed to blend into nature. The structures were tall but elegant, made of a shimmering material that looked like glass, but felt soft and welcoming. Eli could feel the tranquility in the air, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of Earth. Lyra was waiting for him at the landing pad. Her smile was as radiant as ever. "Welcome to Area," she said, her voice a soft melody. "I'm glad you came." Eli felt a wave of relief wash over him. In her presence, he already felt more at ease than he had in weeks. It was like stepping into a dream, but one where he didn't feel out of place. As they walked through the city, Lyra explained the way of life on Area. The people of her planet valued peace, knowledge, and harmony with nature. Technology was advanced, but it never overwhelmed the environment. The streets were lined with trees and plants, and the air was fresh, free of pollution. There were no cars honking or people rushing around. Everything seemed to slow down here, and Eli felt a sense of calm that he had never experienced before. "They live in balance," Lyra explained as they strolled. "We've learned over the centuries that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of our world. We build, but we also nurture." Eli nodded, impressed by what he saw. The people of Area seemed content, their faces calm and kind. There was a certain respect among them, a quiet understanding that wasn't common on Earth. It made Eli think about how much he had taken his own world for granted, always focusing on what was wrong rather than what was right. As they continued their walk, Eli couldn't help but ask, "Do you ever get homesick?" Lyra paused for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I've learned to embrace the beauty of all the places I go. Earth is far from Area, but the connections we make are what matter the most. When you truly understand a person, you see their home in their heart." Eli thought about that for a moment. He had never looked at the world that way before. He had always been focused on finding a place to belong, a place where he could be understood. Maybe he didn't need to look for that place on Earth. Maybe it was about finding the right person to share that connection with, someone like Lyra. They arrived at a large open area in the center of the city. The ground was soft and green, with flowers blooming in every color imaginable. Eli felt like he had stepped into another world, one that was completely different from his own. He could see how much Lyra loved her home, how proud she was to show it to him. "This is where we gather," she said, gesturing to the space around them. "It's a place for reflection, for sharing knowledge, and for celebrating our connection to each other and to our world." Eli looked around, taking in the beauty of the place. It was peaceful, yet full of life. He felt like he could sit there forever, watching the gentle breeze move through the trees and feeling a sense of calm settle over him. He had never realized how much he needed this, how much he needed a break from the noise of Earth, from the constant pressures and disappointments. Lyra looked at him with a knowing smile. "What do you think, Eli? Do you like it here?" Eli turned to her, a small smile on his face. "I think I've never seen anything like it. It's beautiful." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Eli felt a shift in the air, a new understanding between them. He wasn't just seeing the new world, he was seeing it through Lyra's eyes. And in that moment, he realized that he was beginning to see her too, in a way that was more than just admiration. There was something deeper, something growing inside him that he hadn't expected. It was more than a connection. It was the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both were ready to explore. Eli had been on Area for over a week now, and with each passing day, his feelings for Lyra grew stronger. He spent more time with her, learning about her culture, her people, and the peaceful way of life on her planet. The world around him was beautiful, and Lyra's presence made it even more incredible. He had never felt so alive, so connected to someone. Yet, despite the beauty of everything around him, Eli couldn't escape the nagging doubts in the back of his mind. He felt like he was living in a dream, and dreams, as he knew all too well, never lasted forever. Every time he thought about returning to Earth, a wave of guilt washed over him. How could he leave Lyra, leave this world, when he had just begun to experience what true connection felt like? But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the part of him that was scared. What if this wasn't real? What if this was just a passing moment, a brief escape from the pain and loneliness of his old life? Lyra noticed the change in Eli. He had been distant. his smiles less frequent, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. They were sitting in one of Aria's quiet gardens, the soft hum of distant music filling the air. The flowers around them shimmered in the light of the twin suns. It was a perfect afternoon, but Eli felt anything but perfect. "Eli, what's wrong?" Lyra asked, her voice gentle as she reached out to touch his arm. Eli looked up at her, his expression torn. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I feel like I'm here, but I'm not really here. It's like I'm waiting for something to go wrong." Lyra's eyes softened with understanding. She had always known that humans struggled with trust and fear, but hearing it from Eli made her realize just how much he had been through. He had been hurt by the rejections of others, and now, even in the face of something real and beautiful, he couldn't fully embrace it. "You're afraid," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "Afraid that this is too good to be true." Eli nodded, feeling the weight of his doubts. "Yes," he admitted. "I don't want to get hurt again. I've been through so much, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to open myself up to someone else again, especially someone like you." Lyra raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Someone like me?" Eli shifted uncomfortably, not sure how to explain himself. "I mean, you're not like anyone I've ever met. You're not from Earth. You're different. And I keep wondering if I'm just part of your world for a moment, or if this could really be something real, something lasting." Lyra smiled softly, her silver eyes never leaving his. "Eli, you're not just part of my world for a moment. You're here because I want you to be. I want to know you, not just as a human, but as you, the person you are. I'm not asking you to be someone else, Eli. I'm asking you to be the person I see." Eli felt something shift inside him as her words sank in. He had been so caught up in his fears that he had forgotten to see the truth in front of him. Lyra wasn't looking at him for his past mistakes, his failures, or his doubts. She was seeing him for who he truly was, and that was something he hadn't experienced in years. "I'm scared," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to trust again. I don't know if I can." Lyra reached out and gently cupped his face in her hands, her touch soft but grounding. "I'm not asking you to trust right away. Trust takes time. But I want you to know that you have it. I'm here, Eli, and I'm not going anywhere. The choice to trust is yours, but know that you're not alone in this." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket, easing the chill of doubt that had been lingering in his chest. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the feeling of her hands on his face. For the first time in a long while, he felt safe. Safe to feel, safe to be vulnerable, and safe to open his heart again. "I'm scared of being hurt," he admitted, his voice quiet. "But I think I'm even more scared of walking away from something that feels right." Lyra smiled, her eyes filled with tenderness. "Then don't walk away, Eli. Stay with me, and let's see where this goes, together." Eli looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw not just an alien woman, but someone who truly cared for him. It was hard to believe, but the more he looked at her, the more he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the real thing. He didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He didn't want to let fear keep him from something that could be beautiful. "I want to stay," he said softly. "I want to be with you, Lyra." Lyra's smile widened, and she leaned forward, her lips brushing his in a gentle kiss. It wasn't rushed or filled with urgency. It was soft, filled with all the emotions they had been holding back. When they pulled away, Eli's heart was beating faster, but in a good way. The uncertainty still lingered, but now it was mixed with hope. "I'm glad," Lyra said, her voice filled with warmth. "You won't regret this." Eli smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't thought was possible. The path ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to take the next step. After Eli's decision to stay on Area, he felt like his life had shifted in a way he didn't fully understand yet. There was a sense of peace here, a calm he hadn't felt back on Earth. Lyra was by his side, her warmth and understanding pulling him closer to her every day. But even though he had made the choice to stay, Eli couldn't ignore the small nagging doubts that lingered in the back of his mind. He was still adjusting to life on an alien planet, and the cultural differences were beginning to show in ways he hadn't expected. Lyra had been patient with him, showing him the ways of her people, teaching him about their values, their traditions, and their way of life. But some things weren't as easy to understand as others. For example, the concept of personal space was different on Area. The Area people had a deep sense of connection with one another, a closeness that sometimes left Eli feeling overwhelmed. While human relationships often involved boundaries and personal time, the Area people shared everything. They connected in ways that felt foreign to Eli, and he wasn't sure how to navigate it all. One afternoon, as Eli and Lyra were walking through the gardens near her home, he voiced his concerns. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," Eli admitted, rubbing his neck nervously. I'm trying, but everything is so different here. It feels like I'm constantly walking on eggshells." Lyra looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. "I know it's hard," she said softly. "You're from a very different world, Eli, and I'm asking you to adapt to something completely new. But I believe you're stronger than you think. You don't have to be perfect." Eli smiled weakly, grateful for her words, but he still felt like an outsider. "I just don't want to mess things up between us," he confessed. "I want to be with you, but I feel like I'm not doing enough to really understand your world." Lyra's eyes softened as she stopped walking and turned to face him. "Eli," she said, her voice firm yet gentle, "you don't need to understand everything right away. We're learning from each other. There will always be challenges, but what matters is that we try. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to build something real." Eli took a deep breath, feeling comforted by her words. "I guess I just don't want to let you down. I've been let down a lot before, and I don't want to do that to you." Lyra smiled, her silver eyes shining. "You won't let me down. I don't expect perfection, Eli. I just expect you to be yourself. And if you're with me, I'll always stand by you." Eli's heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time since arriving on Area, he felt a sense of peace that was deeper than just the beauty of the planet. He didn't have to be perfect. He didn't have to have all the answers. All he had to do was trust in what they had, trust in Lyra, and in the bond they were building together. As the days passed, Eli became more involved in the community on Area. Lyra took him to gatherings, where people of all kinds shared stories, music, and food. The people here were open and welcoming, but their way of life still felt foreign to him. The way they communicated was so different. There were no barriers, no need for small talk. It was as if everyone connected on a deeper level, instantly understanding each other without words. One evening during a communal meal, Eli found himself sitting at a large table with Lyra and several of her friends. They were all talking at once, sharing stories and laughing, but Eli couldn't help but feel a little out of place. The Area people had a way of speaking that was fluid, like a song. There were no awkward pauses, no silences like the ones he was used to back home. Everything seemed to flow effortlessly, and Eli realized how much he had to learn. He looked over at Lyra, who caught his gaze and smiled. She could tell he was struggling, but instead of making him feel uncomfortable, she reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You're doing great, Eli," she whispered. "Just be yourself." Eli smiled back, feeling the warmth of her encouragement. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but with Lyra by his side, he didn't have to be. He was learning, growing, and finding a new sense of belonging, even in a world so different from his own. Later that night, as they walked back to Lyra's home, Eli felt the weight of the day lift off his shoulders. They had spent hours in the company of others, yet he hadn't felt as lonely as he had in years. He had spent so much time on Earth searching for a connection, and now, here on Area, he was beginning to find it in ways he had never imagined. I still don't know if I fully understand everything, Eli said, his voice thoughtful. But I do know that I want to keep learning. I want to be here with you, Lyra. I don't want to leave. Lyra looked at him, her expression filled with warmth and affection. You don't have to leave, Eli. You're home now. Eli's heart swelled with emotion. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had found a place where he truly belonged, a place where he could grow, learn, and love without the fear of rejection. Aria wasn't just a beautiful planet. It was a new beginning for him, and it was a beginning he wanted to share with Lyra. As they walked under the stars, Eli realized that the challenges he had faced weren't over. But with Lyra by his side, he knew he could face whatever came next. He was no longer alone. Eli woke up to the soft hum of Aria's twin suns rising over the horizon. The sky was a gentle pink, and the air was crisp with the early morning coolness. It was beautiful, and every morning on Aria felt like a gift. But today something felt different. The calm that usually settled over him wasn't there. Instead, there was a strange sense of anticipation. He couldn't shake the feeling that today, something important was about to happen. He walked over to the small balcony that connected to the main room of the house and stared out at the alien city. The buildings stretched into the sky like graceful spires, their surfaces reflecting the morning light. The streets below were quiet, but the world felt alive with possibility. Eli had grown fond of Aria and its people, but as much as he had embraced his new life here, he couldn't ignore the nagging question in his mind. What came next? He had made the decision to stay, but did that mean this was where he would always be? And if so, could he truly live here forever? As if on cue, there was a soft knock at the door. Eli? Lyra's voice called through the door. Are you awake? Yeah, I'm up, Eli replied, turning to face the door. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Lyra standing there, her smile as warm and inviting as ever. She stepped inside, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. I have something important to talk to you about, she said, her voice serious but soft. Eli's stomach tightened. He hadn't expected her to say that. What's going on? Lyra walked over to him, her expression unreadable. She paused, taking a deep breath, then finally spoke. I've been given a choice, she began. A choice that could change everything for us. Eli's confusion deepened. A choice? What kind of choice? Lyra hesitated, then met his gaze. I have been offered a position of great responsibility within my people. A position that would require me to leave Aria and travel to other planets, including Earth, to represent our world. It's an incredible opportunity for me, and it could bring great benefits to both our worlds. Eli's heart sank as he listened to her words. He had been hoping for something else, something that didn't involve separation. The thought of Lyra leaving, even for a short time, made his chest ache. But if you leave, Eli started, unsure of how to express what he was feeling. Lyra nodded, her expression softening with understanding. I know what you're thinking. It's a big decision, and I don't want to leave you, Eli. But this opportunity could help both our worlds come closer. It could bring the kind of peace we've always dreamed of. Eli swallowed hard. The thought of her being so far away was painful. He had just begun to build something real here with Lyra. Their bond had deepened so much in such a short time, and now the idea of distance felt unbearable. Do you want to go? Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes filled with emotion. I do. It's a huge responsibility, and I would be lying if I said I wasn't excited by it. But my heart is here with you, Eli. I don't know if I'm ready to leave you behind. Eli's mind raced. He could see how important this was to Lyra. This wasn't just an opportunity for her. It was a chance to make a difference, to help her people, and possibly even help Earth. He could understand that. But still, the thought of her leaving was like a punch to the gut. I don't want you to go, Eli said, his voice shaking. But I also know that you need to do what's right for you. You have your own dreams, your own future, and I don't want to hold you back. Lyra's eyes glistened, and she reached out to touch his hand. I never want to leave you behind, Eli. But I need you to know that whatever happens, whatever choice I make, I want you to be with me. This is your decision too. If you want to stay on Area, if you want to go back to Earth, we will figure it out together. Eli felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. He wanted to be with Lyra, but the uncertainty of their future hung in the air like a thick cloud. He had already made so many changes in his life, and now this new challenge was forcing him to decide once again. Should he go back to Earth and live a more familiar life? Or should he stay here on Area, a world that had become his home, with Lyra at his side? I don't know what to do, Eli admitted. I never thought this would be something we'd have to decide. Lyra smiled softly, squeezing his hand. We don't have to decide right away. But I wanted to share this with you before I make my final choice. I want you to know that no matter where I go, you will always be in my heart. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The decision was huge, and he felt the weight of it on his shoulders. But one thing was clear. He couldn't make this choice alone. He needed to talk to Lyra, to listen to what she needed, and to think about what was best for both of them. Let's take it one step at a time, Eli said finally, looking into her eyes. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to be with you. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. Lyra's face lit up with a gentle smile, and for the first time in a while, Eli felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but one thing was certain. They were in this together. The days after Lyra's offer were filled with long conversations, quiet moments, and a growing sense of uncertainty. Eli's mind was constantly racing, trying to figure out what was best for him and for their relationship. Lyra had made it clear that no matter what choice she made, she wanted him to be a part of her future. But the idea of her leaving Area and Earth becoming a possibility again filled him with mixed emotions. Eli couldn't deny that Area had become home to him. The beauty of the planet, the kindness of its people, and most importantly, his deepening connection with Lyra had made everything feel more real than it ever had before. But at the same time, the thought of her leaving was something he couldn't easily push aside. It was a clear morning, and Lyra was waiting for him in the same garden where they had spent so many hours together. The flowers were blooming again, and the twin suns bathed the world in a soft, golden light. As Eli approached, he saw her sitting quietly, her gaze lost in the distance. When she noticed him, her expression softened. You've been thinking a lot, haven't you? Lyra asked, her voice gentle. Eli nodded, sitting beside her. I don't know what to do, he said honestly. I don't want you to go, but I also don't want to hold you back. This is something big for you, something important. Lyra reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Eli, I've been thinking too. I know this is hard, and I know it's a big decision, but I've realized something important. Eli looked at her, his heart pounding. What's that? I realize that no matter where I go, no matter what opportunity I take, my heart will always be with you. You're part of my life now, Eli. Whether we're on Area or Earth, it doesn't matter. We'll find a way to make it work. Eli felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't the answer he had expected, but it was the one he needed to hear. Lyra wasn't asking him to choose between her and his future. She was asking him to be part of both, to embrace what was ahead without fear. I want to be with you, Lyra, Eli said, his voice firm. I want us to figure this out together, no matter where that takes us. Lyra smiled, her silver eyes bright. Then we will. We'll go wherever the future leads us, together. As the words settled between them, Eli felt a shift within himself. He had been so focused on what could go wrong that he had forgotten to see what was right in front of him. Lyra wasn't just offering him a chance to stay with her on Area. She was offering him a future that didn't have to be defined by fear or uncertainty. The decision didn't feel so heavy anymore. Together, they could face whatever came next. Eli didn't need all the answers now. What mattered was the trust they had built, the love they shared, and the willingness to face the unknown as a team. The next few days passed quickly as they made their plans. Lyra's position on Earth was set to begin soon, and she had made arrangements for Eli to join her there if he wanted. It was a big step for both of them, but it was one they were ready to take. Eli still had moments of doubt, moments where he questioned what life on Earth would be like for him now, but with Lyra by his side, he knew he could face it. The idea of living in two worlds, of balancing both area and Earth, was intimidating, but it was also exciting. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly in control of his destiny. The day they left Area was bittersweet. The people of the planet had given them a warm send-off, their faces filled with hope for the future. Eli had come to appreciate this peaceful world and the people who had welcomed him as one of their own. But as Lyra took his hand and they boarded the ship bound for Earth, Eli realized that no matter where they went, home was wherever they were together. The journey to Earth felt different this time. The stars outside the ship's window no longer seemed so distant. Eli no longer felt like he was just floating through space, waiting for something to happen. He was part of something bigger now. He was part of Lyra's world, and she was part of his. As the ship entered Earth's atmosphere and the blue planet came into view, Eli looked over at Lyra. Her expression was full of determination and hope, just like his. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it. Together. "Are you ready for this?" Eli asked, his voice steady but full of excitement. Lyra squeezed his hand, her eyes sparkling. "More than anything, with you by my side, I know we can make it work." Eli smiled, feeling the warmth of her words wrap around him like a blanket. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. This was just the beginning of their story. The rest of their journey, wherever it took them, was waiting.